Yeah, so when we're talking about flowering bulbs, they're going to have a couple of characteristics that you want to look for. So the major one is going to be the hardiness. So right now, for example, we're in the beginning of winter. So different bulbs have different hardiness levels as far as basically how much cold weather they can tolerate. So when we're talking about hardiness, the bulb is going to be labeled as a hardy bulb, a semi-hardy bulb, or a tender bulb. And then the second factor that you're going to want to look at with trying to figure out which bulbs you're going to do is time of bloom, right? So that's basically finding out, when exactly are you going to reap the fruits of your labor after you plant the bulbs, right? So here's a map on the right of the USDA, basically the hardiness zones or the growing zones for plants. So here in Clayton County, or in the metro Atlanta area at least, we are in zone 7B. So when you're looking at different bulbs to plant that you buy from the store, you buy online, you want to make sure that you find out if that bulb grows well in that zone. And this information will be on the label. So again, when we're talking about hardiness, if you have semi-hardy bulbs, these are going to be basically bulbs that are hardy in kind of milder climates, but they're going to need a bit of cold protection. So that means make sure you put mulch over those bulbs when it starts getting cold. Then you have hardy bulbs, which means they can withstand freezing temperatures in the ground. And there's a lot of different bulbs that we can plant here in Georgia that are very hardy and tough against the cold. And then tender bulbs, these bulbs cannot withstand any freezing temperatures. So they should only be planted in areas where it's more of a warmer climate only. So this is a really cool chart that we have. And if you would like a copy of this chart, you can just send me an email, and I'll have my email at the end of this presentation. But we have a really cool chart here that's basically the commonly grown bulbs suitable for Georgia. So you can see it lists out the botanical name, the common name. So, really popular bulbs that everyone plants are, tulips, lilies, crocus bulbs, things like that, irises. So you can see that here. Then you can see the hardiness classification as well. So we can see here most spring flowering bulbs are considered hardy bulbs. It also tells you when you can plant them. So planting time, when are you putting them in the ground, the fall, the spring, and then some key planting information. Also, you have your planting depth, the spacing, the flowering time, height of flowering. So again, if you would like this resource, you can just send me an email, but this is a really good chart to have. So when you're looking for different arrangements of bulbs, you can easily glance at this and figure out, what's going to work best for you in your landscape. So time of bloom. So when we're talking about time of bloom with bulbs, some of the major things we're talking about basically are spring flowering bulbs. So really popular spring flowering bulbs are tulips. Tulips are full of color, especially when you plant them in mass. So with spring flowering bulbs, you're planting these bulbs in the fall, and then they, of course, flower in the spring. So you're planting those way ahead of time. So then with the summer flowering bulbs, you would plant those in the spring after the last frost. So in the Atlanta area, usually the last frost is going to be sometime in pretty much mid to late April. So once the danger of the last frost has passed, you can get out there and plant your summer flowering bulbs. And, of course, lilies are probably one of the most popular summer flowering bulbs there are. So that's when you would plant bulbs like that. And then you have some few fall flowering bulbs. So if you want to, add some color for more of a full year, because a lot of people, we like to, get out in the spring and summer, and that's when we like to add our color. But there are some bulbs that flower in the fall, early winter time. So crocus bulbs are great, awesome for that. So with those, you would plant those a little earlier, and then you have some winter flowering bulbs as well that bloom later in the season. So then when you're talking about bulbs and you're looking in your yard trying to figure out where you should plant them. So one of the main things you want to look for are sunlight and drainage. In this picture here, we have a good picture of someone's backyard. As you can see, it gets plenty of sun, and they have a wide variety of different flowering bulb plants in their yard. So sunlight is key. Bulbs really like a good amount of sunlight. And then drainage is also very important, because keep in mind with the bulbs, you're planting the bulbs kind of deep in the ground. So you want to plant them in an area where water does not collect and settle in that area. You want to be able to plant them in an area where water can drain easily. And we'll talk about that. So with the soil, you have your, so with the soil, you have the soil in your landscape. And of course, you want to make sure it's well drained as far as drainage. And then you also want to make sure the pH is correct. So with flowering bulbs, you want your pH to be about 6 to 7. And then also I have a picture here on the left of, the infamous Georgia red clay as well. So some of you may have heavy clay soil, or you may have heavy sandy soils, and neither of those are going to be ideal for bulbs, because the heavy clay soil is not going to drain very well. And then if it's, basically kind of 100% beach sand where you are, then it's not going to be able to hold water well either. So we'll talk about how you can improve your soil with those. So as far as drainage, this is an easy activity that you can do. So this is they call it a perk test or a percolation test. So basically what you do is you just dig a hole that's about 1 foot deep, and then you just fill it to the top with water, and then you come back the next day, fill it again with water, and then you see how long it takes for that water to drain from that hole. So on that second day, if it takes about 8 to 10 hours, then that's a sign that you have adequate drainage for bulbs. But if it takes longer than that, and it's just sitting there for days and days, then you're going to want to add some amendments to that area, because drainage is not going to be good. So here is a picture of some different amendments that you can add. So we have peat moss here, compost sand. So a variety of different soil amendments that you can use to help with the drainage and overall nutrients of that soil. So once you go into your yard and you're looking at where to plant, you find out that you have good drainage. You probably won't know the pH. You'll have to guess on that, but we can help you out here at the extension office with a soil test. So a soil test at our office is just $10, and this is what the soil test looks like. So on the left here, it shows you the nutrients that are available in your soil. It'll show you the amount of phosphorus, potassium, calcium, things like that. And then on the right, it'll show you the pH of the soil. So from this soil test, you'll be able to find out exactly how much fertilizer you need to add to your soil that's adequate for bulbs. And then you'll be able to also find out if you need to change your pH to fit the bulbs as well. So In that $10 soil test, you can get all this great information just at a glance so you know exactly what to do. So also, now that you have your, now that you have, the types of bulbs you want to plant, you prepared your beds, you've determined what type of soil you have, now you can start looking for the different bulbs you want to plant. So let's see. So on the left here, we have a picture of some healthy bulbs. So you can notice that the skin's a light color, everything looks even, everything looks kind of vibrant and healthy. And then on the right, that you can see that those bulbs look moldy and black and they're broken apart and things like that. So on the left, you can easily see that those bulbs are very healthy and that they should do well in your garden. And then on the right, you can see those bulbs are of a lower quality. So you want to be mindful of what your bulbs look like. And then I guess one easy example of this, so right now we're in December. So if you are going to the garden store, in the spring and they still have spring flowering bulbs then chances are those are just leftovers from, this past fall. So those bulbs are probably going to be old. They're probably going to have some decomposition and some rot in there. So they're probably not going to be of the best quality because they're not going to be a fresh supply of bulbs. So this is key to having a successful bulb garden. So then you have your planting. So now that we have our types of bulbs, this is just a diagram on the left of how you can plant your bulbs. So like tulips, for example, tulips to me look best when they're planted in mass, right? So if someone has a garden bed in the front of their house and there's 100 tulips planted in there, in rows or in different shapes, you really get that, that wow factor. So with that, with planting tulips, you might not want to use a small shovel to plant, hundreds and hundreds of holes for that. But there's a free form technique at the top here where you just, dig holes in a garden bed and put the bulbs in. Or then you have patch planting where you can use different tools to be more efficient in how many bulbs you're installing. And then on the last part here, this is a picture of a pot where you can also plant bulbs. And you can see that at the top there's mulch, then there's soil, and then where you see these bulbs here, it says this distance varies depending on species of bulb used. So every bulb that you buy is not going to have the exact same planting depth. Then we have a good rule of thumb for how you can remember that. So the rule of thumb for that is the planting depth from the top of the bulb to the soil surface should be 2 to 3 times greater than the diameter of the bulb, if it's 2 inches or more in diameter, or 3 to 4 times the diameter of the smaller bulbs. So that's a rule of thumb that you can use, or also, of course, you can just read the label of the bulbs. So also on the label, again, it's going to tell you the hardiness zone that's compatible with that bulb. Some bulbs actually need to be pre-cooled before you plant them. So again, the label will let you know that. And then, again, it'll tell you what that depth is as well. So as far as tools, right? So I talked about the tulips earlier. So, I don't know about you, but if I wanted to plant massive tulips, I wouldn't, plant 200 holes with just a hand shovel, right? But besides a little shovel, you also have a bulb planter at the top right corner here. That's a tool that you have. Then I also saw, a even more efficient way to plant bulbs in this video that I'm going to show you. And they're using, a power drill basically with an auger on it. And this is a really quick, easy, fast way if you want to dig, a bunch of holes in a little garden bed and plant a bunch of bulbs. So we'll check this out.
Okay, late season bulb planting. We've got a 20 volt DeWalt drill with the large flex volt pack on it, 60 volt, 20 volt. And in 20 volt mode, that's 6 amp hours, so it's a pretty big battery. And then we've got the bulb drill on there, 24 inch. Those are about $12 a piece. Pretty inexpensive, you know, thinly built. Notice the twist on that drill. It's pretty aggressive. So if you're drilling in virgin clay soils like this, it can want to bury itself and get hung up. So a way around that is when you're drilling, if you brace that pack inside your leg, so if it catches, it doesn't twist and, you know, twist your arm around, you can actually be pretty effective on it. So full speed and just pulse. You see how we're getting in the clay there? And there's your hole, and there is your tulip bulb. Plant those about 6 inches deep. Go ahead and just put the soil back on top. So pretty fast, you can do a few hundred in no time at all, and really beautify your landscape or help protect your fruit trees from, you know, all those uglies like rabbits and deer. Anyway, I hope that helps.
Yep. So if you have a power drill laying around, you know, you can just buy that auger tool online or at your local hardware store. And then you have pretty much a bulb machine that you can use if you want to really plant a bunch in your landscape. So then in this video, this shows you more of what we were talking about earlier about planting bulbs in pots, and then about the planting depths, just so you can get a better idea of what that looks like.
If you love spring flowers like daffodils and tulips, then you need to plan and plant ahead, because spring blooming bulbs start with fall planting. Hi, I'm William Moss, and I'm going to show you how to plant bulbs for a stunning spring garden. The most popular type of spring bulbs include tulips, which come in a vivid array of colors like reds, yellows, oranges, purples, and whites, and daffodils, also called narcissus. Typically they're in colors of yellow and white, but there are also some peach varieties. They have that little cup in the middle surrounded by the frilly petals that everyone is so familiar with. The first step is to dig a hole. We've already got our hole here, and the depth of our hole is determined by the size of the bulb. The general rule is 3 times as wide as the bulb is how deep you need to go. So this particular bulb is about 2 inches, our hole's about 6 inches. You can see here for these smaller bulbs, they're about 1 inch, so they're only 3 inches deep into the ground. And then you have to plant it right side up. You'll notice that the bottom of the bulb has some old ruffled roots on the bottom, and the top of it will be more tapered. The next step is to sprinkle a little fertilizer in the bottom of the hole, turn it all in. That way the bulbs are fed, and they have food and nutrition waiting at their roots right away. So you simply just place the bulbs in the hole. You want to make sure they aren't touching. So now I'm arranging them with the tops up and having them not touching. If you've got the space, you know, you can plant them by the hundreds. It really looks nice. If you're working in an existing garden like we are here, we put about 12 of them in this hole. You never want to plant one single bulb. Always plant them in mass to give you a big show. The next step is to cover them up with soil. After you water, now it's time to mulch. You simply spread about 2 inches of mulch over the top. You can actually go to 2 to 4 inches over the top, and that helps keep the soil a consistent temperature all winter. And that's it. You step back and let nature take its course. In early spring, you'll notice the green shoots starting to pop up. Plant these beautiful bulbs every fall, and you'll have a flower-filled yard every spring.
Yeah, so as you can see, you know, bulb planting is pretty easy. So at the end of that, you notice, you know, he planted his bulbs is probably the fall or the winter time. So he was waiting for them to bloom in that next spring. So there's also a technique that you can use. It's called forcing bulbs. So it's basically where you force bulbs to bloom early indoors, and then you can enjoy them a little bit earlier. So some good bulbs that that work well with this technique include crocus bulbs, galanthus, hyacinth, and tulips, for example. So in this video, this shows you the technique that you use to force bulbs, where you're basically just forcing them to bloom earlier, so you don't have to wait, months and months for that color.
Hi, I'm Jessica Smith with Bland's Nursery in West Jordan, Utah. And in today's series, we're talking about how to plant bulbs. Right now, we're going to discuss how to force tulip bulbs. You don't need to wait until spring for your tulips to bloom. You can actually have them blooming indoors. Now, the way to do that, though, is your preparation is basically going to be the same. Get your bulbs first part of September when they begin to arrive at your local nurseries and that. And what you'll want with a tulip bulb.
And so in Georgia, you're going to want to start potting your bulbs in October or November. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in September.
Is a nice big bulb. Sometimes those little small bulbs won't give you the flower that you want. Nice big bulb is what you want to start with. Now with the tulip bulb, when planting it, you'll want the flat side against the outside of the pot. What that does is your first bottom leaf is going to come out this way, and it's going to kind of soften the side of the pot for you. It's not a mandatory thing that you plant it that way, it just looks a little prettier. Now when choosing the tulip bulb, what you'll want to do is look on the labeling. Not all tulip bulbs bloom at the same time. So you don't want to go with something that blooms early and then one that blooms late in the same pot. You can do early, mid, and late season tulips in different pots and then just bring them out of cold storage as you want them to bloom. Now on your packaging system, it's going to tell you how high the bulb gets when it's blooming and also what season it blooms in. These are late. Those are, of course, your ones that are going to come on at the very last. So make sure you don't go with something that's early again and then something that's late if you're wanting them to bloom at the same time in the same pot. Let's go ahead and plant our pots here. With the tulip bulbs, you want drainage on the bottom, of course. Otherwise, the water will sit in there and actually rot out your bulb. So make sure you've got a pot that has drainage holes. For large pots, you can put some plastic bottles or even like your little containers that your annual flowers and that came in earlier in the year, and put them down at the bottom of it below the soil level. Not only to help with drainage, it's going to help. You don't need to fill that entire pot with soil, and for big heavy pots that you may be putting tulip bulbs in that in, it'll make it a lot easier for you to move. Okay, now with the tulip bulbs, go ahead again, use a nice potting soil, good quality potting soil. Don't use your soil out in your yard. You want a nice potting soil. You can go ahead and add a little bit of slow release phosphate like a bone meal down below, kind of mix it in with your soil if you'd like. What you want to
And at this step, it's best if you use specifically potting soil, because that soil is going to help with drainage versus the regular, more heavy garden soil that you have in your yard. So at this step, it's important to remember, make sure you buy some good potting soil.
Do though at this point, again, is just to put the bulbs down in. Now, of course, the more bulbs you go with, the bigger impact it's going to have in the springtime. Or not in the spring, but necessarily in your house. You can also layer other types of tulips. If you're going with a smaller type that blooms at the same type, you can actually put a layer of soil and then do those right around there. If they're going to be a little bit lower, of course, you'd want those on the outside with your taller ones in the middle. Now, the more bulbs you put in, of course, the bigger impact that you're going to have. Put them close. I don't like them to touch, that way if one rots out, it's less likely to rot out the other one next to it. Now, I'm actually a little bit low here on this one with my soil. So you just want to cover up the bulb itself. You want to leave just a little bit though down for water and actually help to give them a little bit of support. Now this needs to go into cold storage. It still needs to have its cold storage time. It's not just going to pop up. So for about 12 to 16 weeks, this needs to go into an area that is about 45 to 55 degrees. This could be a spare refrigerator, a root cellar, and you can even put it down into the ground itself throughout the winter time and force it clear until next spring to have it out on your front porch. Make sure if you're storing it outside throughout the winter months where it freezes though, you mulch around the pot. Leaves, straw.
Yeah, so at this stage, once you leave it for about 12 weeks in cold storage, you can actually remove it from that area, and then you want to expose that pot to sunlight because by that time the roots would have developed. So yeah, after that period, you move it to like a nice sunny window that you have so they can start sprouting and making those flowers. But I guess the downside of forcing bulbs is that, so this is kind of an unnatural way. You're kind of like speeding up nature basically. So typically you're not going to want to use these bulbs over and over again because they're not going to be as good of quality as more naturalized bulbs that have sprouted and bloomed in your yard. So that's just something to keep in mind. So after they're done blooming, you're probably better off just getting rid of them and getting some new bulbs instead of trying to rely on them every year to bloom.
Bark product, anything to help insulate it. With straw, they'll be a little bit careful. Sometimes that can have seeds, and you can have a mess on your hand when those seeds begin.
Yep. So if you want to try forcing bulbs, that's the technique. And so lastly, of course, with gardening, you're always going to have some competition with different pests. So with flowering bulbs, you will encounter, of course, some disease and insect problems, but the best thing you can do is try to prevent those problems. So that goes back to making sure you're planting the bulbs in a well-suited area, that has good soil drainage, that has the adequate amount of nutrients, that has good sunlight. And then, of course, back to selecting bulbs, you want to make sure the bulbs that you're actually planting are healthy, they look healthy, they're not rotted, they don't have bugs on them. So making sure you start, with a high quality bulb. But some common pests of these different flowers, they're going to include things like aphids, Japanese beetles, slugs, different rotting diseases. But, all those things are just a part of gardening. But if you ever have any problems or trouble with different pests that you don't know what to do or you don't know what they are, you can send me an email or give me a call and I can help you figure that out. So now that you know a little bit more about planting bulbs, so right now, today is December 1st, so we actually still have about a month left in our Georgia climate for you to plant a lot of spring flowering bulbs. So if you want to go to the store tomorrow and purchase some bulbs, you certainly should do that because you still have time. So I just listed a few that you can still grow. So crocus are really beautiful bulbs and they do well in the cold. So you can plant those. You have some cyclamen flowers. If you like irises, still a great time for that. Lilies, you can still try lilies, but lilies are they're not gonna flower until summertime. And then, of course, also with lilies, that they're summer flowering bulb, but you can plant them in the spring as well. But lilies like to multiply in the ground, and they just, like a lot of bulbs, come back every year. So this is probably one of my favorite bulbs to plant in the garden. And then lastly, we have tulips. So you gotta love tulips, right? So again, these are an awesome bulb to plant, especially when you plant them in mass. And again, you still have time to put these in the ground. And these are probably one of the most diverse bulbs that you can get because they come in so many different colors. You know, just about any color you can think of, you can get a tulip in that color. So that's a short list of things you can plant. But again, I have a list of recommended bulbs that you can plant in Georgia that we saw earlier. Yeah, this list it gives you a lot of great information. So if you want that, you can send me an email or give me a call, and I have my information listed here. And then really quick, I have an evaluation for you all, and I see some questions in the chat. Oh, okay. So Thomas said that he thought about purchasing a bulb drill attachment, but he's afraid of severing tree roots in my yard. So yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, if you do decide to go with the drill auger option, you definitely want to make sure that you are aware of what's in that area as far as tree roots, making sure there's no water pipes or anything that you may run into. So that's a good point. So make sure you're aware of what's in the ground. Someone else asked, how do you propagate bulbs? I'm not really sure about, I guess, the propagation, more so because with a lot of bulbs, they'll naturally multiply in the ground anyway. So you'll have more flowers than you planted in the beginning. And a lot of them, so they'll naturally multiply in that area. But other than that, I'm not sure what other techniques that you can use. But if you send me an email with that question, I'll try to find out what your other options are as far as that. That sounds good. Thomas asked, can you dig up your caladiums and I guess those are canna lilies, I guess? Yes. All right, with those, I have to double check on those. But yeah, if you send me an email, Thomas, just with that question, so I have your info so I can get back to you on that. Let me double check and see when's the best time for that. And then, again, if anyone wants the list I talked about of all the different recommended bulbs and when to plant them and things like that, you can also send me an email as well. And that is on the screen here. But other than that, if there is no more questions, I really appreciate you all logging in. And I hope I helped you out with your bulb project this winter. All right, Claire asked, what's the procedure for a soil test? So for a soil test, you can just come by our office and pick up a soil bag, and it's just $10. And you basically pick 10 random spots in your yard or your landscape, and you dig about 6 to 8 inches deep. You put those small samples, like a shovelful, into a plastic bucket and mix it all up. And then you're gonna take about probably 1 to 2 sandwich bags full of soil. And that'll be your sample. And then you can just bring that to our office and we'll put it in the soil bag for you and ship it off to our lab for analysis. And you usually get your results in about a week or two. Yep. All right. Well, hope to hear from you all in the future and continue to sign up for these programs. And are there any other topics that you all would like to learn more about, or any other problems you have in your yard that we can help you with? You can just type those in the chat and I can get those on the schedule. If not, hope everyone enjoys their evening. Fresh herbs, winter herbs. All right, herbs. Yep, we can do another herbs class. All right, having a problem with ants. All right, well, I have ants and herbs for next year. All right, pollinator flowers for hummingbirds, got it. All right, well, y'all enjoy.